over 1 year old, and there appears to be no solution in sight. Every day, thousands of young soldiers and innocent civilians are suffering the consequences of this brutal war. It is an embarrassment to humanity that in the 21st century, we are witnessing the first nation-against-nation war in a European theater since 1945. But this video is not about apportioning blame or about discussion of the causes and so-called rationales for the conflict. Instead, we place all our focus on a possible framework for peace. We refer to this framework as coins in the air. It is becoming widely recognized that for a peace settlement to occur, both Russia and Ukraine would have to conclude that a total victory scenario is not realistic and that they would need to accept giving some degree of painful concessions. However, peace discussions cannot even start given the decision from Russia, Ukraine, and the West to frame this conflict in existential terms, and to the deadlocked military situation making the conflict look more like blood-draining World War I trench warfare, rather than a war with one side being able to attain a clear victory over the other. Of the current 4 possible outcomes, a total Russian victory, a complete Ukrainian victory, victories by both Russia and Ukraine, or having both Russian and Ukraine losing in the end, only the latter one seems likely, especially the longer the war lasts. Even worse, this last scenario presents serious chances for escalation with outcomes that could endanger the world. Let's not forget that even if with a weaker economy, Russia remains a nuclear superpower. And yet, given this standoff, compromises do not seem possible. Russians will not simply desist from their claims and leave the territories they already occupy. Ukraine, on the other hand, is not in the position of conceding these territories and accepting they would no longer be part of their nation. What to do? How to break this deadlock then? Knowing what we know now, wouldn't it be great to have a time machine to turn back the clock to a time where peaceful negotiations could have prevented all this mess? Obviously, this is impossible. Another imaginary solution would be to do what we do when our computers crash, press alternate control delete to reboot or, if necessary, do a system restore to a date where the computer was working well. But then again, this is not realistic. Still, for the sake of discussion, let's pretend we could restore the status quo to the year 2013. This was before the so-called Dignity Revolution in Ukraine ended up removing the Moscow-friendly President Viktor Yanukovych, and which provided the rationale for Russia to take over Crimea and to support Russian separatist movements in the East. Even then, the 2013 situation would no longer be an acceptable reset point. Not only Ukrainians would continue to object to having what many considered to be a Russian puppet as a leader, but Russia itself would not agree to return Crimea's control back to Ukraine. The fact is that Russia's earlier demand that Ukraine forfeit the idea to join the European Community or NATO has now evolved into a newly manifested claim that Crimea and the Ukrainian eastern provinces are in fact part of Russia. So, we are seemingly back to square zero. But before we declare the situation hopeless, what if we could unwind things just enough so that we can move to a state of strategic vagueness that preserves each side's claims while opening an avenue for negotiations? In this video, we offer a possible approach to peace based on this concept. We refer to it as the coins in the air peace framework because it proposes a way to reach such a state of unresolved ambiguity with just enough room to allow the start of serious peace discussions. The framework proposes the following steps. 1. Immediate cease of hostilities with all warring armies staying frozen in place, and with the suspension of any further resupplies for the standing armies, other than the non-lethal ones. This first step is perhaps the hardest to attain. There would need to be monitoring and prompt conflict resolution to ensure the truce is not broken, or if broken, that violations would not escalate into full war again. This monitoring and resolution could be led by a group of nations viewed as truly neutral by all parties. 2. Presumably, Ukraine would not agree to an unbounded armistice like the one occurring between North Korea and the US and South Korea since 1953. There would have to be a deadline for Russia and Ukraine to start and to complete the withdrawal of all their forces from the disputed territories, with the United Nations filling in with blue helmets to provide internal security in each region. The duration of the deadline would be conditioned only by logistical considerations and would be a period of months. Clearly, the most problematic aspect of this step would be the disarmament or standing down of the many regional armed militias formed in support, or against, their region's independence. One thing is to simply ask for the withdrawal of regular forces from a territory, another to ask armed residents to actually lay down their arms in place. The mechanics of this process would need to be clearly defined as to ensure the security of all involved factions. 3. Following a short stabilization period to allow for resettlement of populations and return of refugees, the UN would proceed to the establishment of special autonomous territories for each of the areas in conflict: Donetsk, Luhansk, Kherson, and Crimea. This process would include a census of population living on each of these regions prior to 2014 and interim elections to establish civilian administrative governance within each region. 4. At this point, the coins are in the air. Neither Russia nor Ukraine can claim control of the disputed regions. Negotiations between Russia and Ukraine could formally begin in earnest with the possible brokering of supporting Western nations, China, and India. By now, both adversaries are keeping their options for a successful resolution. Even if they know their desired outcome may not occur, at a minimum, there is now a mechanism in place for each side to reach a face-saving result, even if the result is not totally aligned with their goals. Most importantly, we have finally moved the debate away from war. 5. The coins would remain in the air for as long as the negotiations continued, but a possible deadline of 5 or 10 years could be established to be triggered automatically if the direct negotiations failed to agree on specific governances for each region. If no negotiated agreement were to occur for a region prior to this deadline, the UN would conduct a referendum, where only citizens that were living in each region prior to 2014 would be asked to decide one of the three following options. A. Agree to become part of Russia. B. Agree to remain part of Ukraine. C. Become an independent nation. 6. Russia and Ukraine would be committed to agree to whatever outcome is decided by each region's population as part of this plan. The coins would land where they might. Regardless of the outcome, the disputed regions would agree to remain demilitarized and neutral for a period of decades. The only exception would be Crimea, who would be expected to continue to support the presence of Russian and Ukrainian naval bases regardless of the decided status. This is basically it. Clearly, this proposed framework is not designed to fully resolve all outstanding issues. However, it is of essence that the resolution to the territorial dispute along the proposed process, as outlined in points 1 to 6, is fully decoupled from whether agreement is reached on many other ancillary issues, such as possible restitution costs, the prevalence or suspension of international sanctions, trade disputes, and the freedom to join military and economic alliances, amongst others. What's important is to keep the proverbial ball rolling. Long-lasting peace will, no doubt, be an arduous process, but given the situation, we truly hope that coins in the air can at least serve as the seed needed to break the impasse and to stop the violence as soon as possible. All we can do is hope for peace. If you think this idea has merit, please like this video and share the link to others. Who knows, with any luck, it might reach those with influence to act upon it. Thanks for watching.